Did you know that the key to spending more time stitching and less time pre-marking our quilt for ruler quilting is learning how to use the reference lines on an acrylic ruler? I love reference lines. They help me stitch designs like this without marking. These floating triangles can be stitched just using the reference lines. Let me show you how. We're going to mark lines that are 3 inches apart on a piece of fabric. Those represent our seam lines. So pretend it's a border or sashing. I've used some ruler stickers to represent the 3 inches, which are the red arrow stickers. That represents the 3 inches of the sashing or border, and then in between that, the halfway mark is the green arrow, 1.5 inches. Now that I have that in place, I can stitch from left to right a 3-inch line indicated by the 2 red arrows. A quick reference having the arrow stickers. Those reference lines are 3 inches apart on the ruler. Once I've stopped right on the line, I can use this channel feature of the STITCHLINE Ruler Quilting tool to easily go from left to right, up and down to stitch. Now I'm rotating the ruler so that the closed end of the channel is in front of the ruler foot. That way I can use it to line it up with the reference line on the fabric and the needle. Position the green arrow so that I stitch 1.5 inches down the seam. Remember, the line represents the seam, so it's stitch in the ditch. From the green arrow to the red arrow is 1.5 inches. Now I'm going to stitch from right to left. All I need to do is line up the 2 reference lines on the ruler with the seam lines, which again are the 2 lines I marked on this one piece of fabric. This is how I practice techniques, by taking a fat quarter and learning how to use the reference lines. So from red to red is 3 inches. From green to red is 1.5 inches. This is all on the ruler. I'm stitching from left to right and right to left and going down 1.5 inches. And I can do this very quickly just using the reference lines on the ruler. If my sashing or border is 5 inches or 2 inches, I would do the same thing. I would place the ruler sticker arrows to indicate the distance I want to stitch. That way I can quickly see it and just go from one point to the next and just repeat. Note, when we are stitching in the ditch, it's likely we won't see the stitching on the fabric. So if you want to see the floating triangles within a border or sashing, you want to stitch left to right less than the width of the border or sashing. So right now I'm stitching 3 inches. I would probably stitch, say, 2 3/4 so that I can actually see the floating triangles. And then I would adjust where my arrow stickers are on the ruler to help me achieve the effect. Since this is a single piece of fabric and we don't have seams, you will see all the stitching. Also notice how I stitch from the red to the green or the green to the red. They are 1.5 inches apart. So I can start at the red arrow and then stitch to the green, and I will still get the 1.5 because they only indicate reference lines that are 1.5 inches apart. Another thing to note is ruler control. Depending upon what you're stitching, you might want to stitch that 1.5 inch distance or the 3 inch distance at different parts of the ruler. That's another good reason why we want to practice. Here is an example of how I've changed the position of the ruler so that it's stitching on the diagonal. When we have a long ruler like this and we're using a home machine like this Burnett 79, we don't want the ruler to hit the back of the machine. Most often on domestic machines, I will stitch vertically or perpendicular to the machine. That way I'm not worried about hitting the back of the machine. Stitching left to right works fine for a short distance, but could be challenging for continuous long stitching. When we need to stitch a very long line, vertical or diagonal positioning of the acrylic ruler is better on a domestic machine. Also, I don't know if you noticed that I've been using the channel with the curve end facing me, not behind the ruler foot. I should say in front of the ruler foot, because there's a reference line and I can use that reference line to help me stitch exactly on the line. If I have the open end of the ruler in front of the ruler foot, I don't have a reference line to help me make sure I'm stitching on the line. Now that we've almost finished stitching the first pass of the floating triangle design, we're going to stitch the second pass. When we stitch the second pass, we're going to use a different part of the 3-in-1 ruler, the STITCHLINE ruler. With the needle in the corner, we want to stitch from one corner to the other, and we want to get there precisely. Use the tab on the ruler by pointing it toward the corner. I'm shifting it down so that there's room for the foot. There is a reference line we can point toward that corner and the tab pointing toward the corner. Using the reference line on the ruler tells me where the needle should stop stitching. And we need that because we can't see the corner once the foot is over the corner. Let's do that again. We're going to stitch from one corner to the next. I'm going to point the tab toward that corner that gives the direction for the stitching. Then the reference line on the acrylic, the horizontal reference line, tells me where my needle should stop. So we're using two different features on the ruler, a reference line and the tab. We're stopping right there on that horizontal line that we pointed toward that corner where we wanted to stop. Let's do it again. Lining up the edge of the tab, pointing toward the corner, lining up the horizontal line toward the corner. I know which direction it's stitching and I know where to stop. Stop the needle right at the horizontal reference line. So the tab gives the direction of the stitching, the ending point. The horizontal reference line on the ruler tells me where the needle should stop. I want to give enough room for the ruler foot to actually hit where I want it to stop. And that's why I choose the second horizontal reference line from the tab. And we're just going to repeat that process. Over time, this will become instinctive and natural to use the tab to give the direction for the stitching, and then using the horizontal reference line to know where to stop stitching for precise stitching for both direction, location, and for completing a design. Pointing the tab, pointing the horizontal line. You can see I'm double checking before I begin stitching. Now that the STITCHLINE 3-in-1 ruler quilting tool stitched floating triangles by using the ruler features, the tab, the channel, and the reference lines, you can see the benefit of learning how to use the reference lines. It saves time. We don't have to mark our quilts. We can just use the ruler. The STITCHLINE 3-in-1 ruler quilting tool, made by a quilter for quilters.